In the sunburnt village of Acor, where tradition walked in the daylight and whispers lived in the dark, there was one woman who defied every rule and expectation. Annette. She was bold, she was stunning, and she was entirely uninterested in becoming someone's wife. While other young women of Acor dreamed of weddings and dowries, of being chosen by a decent man with a good harvest and strong cattle, Annette played a different game altogether. To her, love was not romance. It was transaction. Men were not partners, they were clients. And marriage? That was a contract she had no desire to sign. She lived on her own land, earned her own coin, and followed only her own rules. Her presence turned heads, and her name stirred curiosity. Some feared her, others envied her. But no one could ignore her. Many women in Acor despised her openly. They accused her of disrespecting custom, of threatening the peace of their homes. They whispered behind her back and judged her to her face. But Annette never cowered. Her retort was always cutting, always delivered with a knowing smirk. It's not my fault your husbands prefer my hips to yours. And when the younger girls mocked her solitude, she would simply tilt her head and laugh. You have husbands who can't even afford 3 square meals. I have men lining up to give me gold. Tell me again who's losing. She wasn't just beautiful. She was magnetic. Men were drawn to her like moths to fire, knowing they might get burned, but still unable to resist the flame. Annette had mastered the art of seduction. With a glance, she could unsettle a man's certainty. With a touch, she could undo his resolve, and once a man had her, truly had her, he never walked away the same. They said even the king had fallen under her spell. By the time she was 25, Annette was more than a woman. She was a legend, rich, influential, untouchable, a force both admired and feared. But power, like hunger, is never satisfied. One humid evening, as the village air buzzed with the scent of palm wine and firewood, Annette overheard something that made her pause mid-step. 2 merchants whispered near the well about a man coming to Acor, a rich chief, an outsider. His name? Chief Undu. He wasn't just any traveler. He was the largest palm nut exporter in the entire eastern region. A man of stature, of wealth, of appetite. Jackpot. Annette's mind spun with possibilities. If she could capture his attention, if she could play her cards just right, this would be the most lucrative arrangement she'd had in years. She didn't waste a moment. The next morning, she called upon her network. Tailors, informants, former lovers who still owed her favors. She asked about Chief Undu. Where would he stay? When would he arrive? Was he married? What did he like? What did he hate? Information, after all, was Annette's true currency. Once she had what she needed, she began to prepare. During the day, she vanished from the usual village spots. No marketplace, no strolls. She was indoors, tending to rituals passed down from the old women who had once taught her the secrets of honey, oils, and shadow. Her skin glowed, her eyes sharpened. Her scent turned heads before her voice ever reached a room. At night, she walked under the moonlight, her steps silent, her posture regal. She visited her tailor in secret, having new dresses made with fabrics that shimmered subtly and clung just enough. She did not rush. She calculated. Because Annette knew something others had forgotten. Desire is a game of patience. And she always played to win. What she didn't know yet was that this time, the game would play her too. But that's a story for tomorrow. For now, Annette was ready. And the chief? He had no idea what storm was about to walk into his world, wearing red silk and a smile. 3 days later, Chief Undu arrived in Acor. He came with the weight of reputation and the silence of power. No entourage, no loud announcement. Just a sleek convoy of black jeeps, a ring of loyal guards, and the kind of calm that meant everything could be bought and nothing could be trusted. The village buzzed like a beehive. Children whispered stories, women peeked through windows, men adjusted their shirts and walked straighter, pretending not to care. Everyone knew he was important, but they didn't know just how much Annette had already prepared for this moment. She stood at the balcony of her home, watching the dust rise from the road as the jeeps passed. She didn't blink, her expression unreadable. But inside her, something stirred. Not nervousness, no. Anticipation. The game had begun. That evening, as Chief Undu dined in the guest house prepared for him by the village council, Annette made her move, not toward him, but toward the people who would surround him. She attended the welcome gathering in a crimson dress that didn't shout but whispered. She greeted the elders respectfully, laughed with the younger men just enough to be remembered, and let her presence linger like the perfume she wore, warm, mysterious, expensive. Undu noticed her. Of course he did. But Annette didn't look his way, not once. That was her power. While the others tried to get close, she made herself scarce, elusive, and in doing so, unforgettable. 2 nights later, at a trade banquet hosted under a canopy of lanterns and palm trees, Undu approached her. "You're not from here," he said, eyes scanning her with practiced ease. Annette smiled softly. "I am, but maybe you're just used to women who announce themselves." He chuckled. "Maybe I am." They spoke briefly. Light banter loaded with suggestion, but Annette was careful. She left before the music faded. No lingering touch, no invitation, just a glance over her shoulder that said, "If you want more, you'll have to come find me." And he did. A week into his stay, Undu sent word. He wanted to see her privately. She accepted, but on her terms, a walk, not dinner. In the open air, not behind closed doors. She wore white that night, the opposite of her usual colors, barefaced, simple, as if to say, "I don't need decoration to disarm you." They walked through the edge of the forest, fireflies blinking around them. Undu asked questions, where she learned to speak so well, why she never married, what she wanted out of life. Annette answered with elegance, always leaving just enough unsaid. "I've had many things," she said at one point, her voice low. "But peace? That's the rarest currency." Undu looked at her, surprised. "I didn't expect you to say that." "That's why you're still interested," she replied. He laughed. But something in his expression changed. He wasn't just intrigued now, he was challenged. And that was exactly what Annette wanted. Or so she thought. Because as the days unfolded, the lines began to blur. Their meetings became more frequent. Not always romantic. Sometimes they just walked or argued about trade politics or sat in silence watching the rain. Annette caught herself laughing more than usual. And not her practiced, charming laugh, the real one. The one she hadn't used in years. She hated it. Feelings were dangerous. They made her human. Vulnerable. She reminded herself over and over, this is a game. You're playing a role. Stay sharp. But Undu wasn't like the others. He didn't chase. He studied. He listened. He challenged her with quiet confidence. And for the first time, Annette began to feel something that didn't have a price. One night he asked her, "What do you see when you look at me?" She wanted to say, "An opportunity." But the words didn't come. Instead, she looked away and said, "Nothing." Because the truth was beginning to scare her. And for a woman like Annette, fear wasn't just foreign. It was forbidden. She returned home that night unsettled. She poured herself a drink and stood before the mirror, studying her reflection as if it belonged to someone else. Who are you becoming? The question echoed louder than she expected. She had built her life like armor, structured, flawless, impenetrable. But somehow this man, this quiet, steady outsider, had begun to slip past her defenses. Not because he forced his way in, but because he didn't try to. And that, she realized, was the most dangerous move of all. Annette had always believed in her control. She didn't just wield beauty, she weaponized it. Her power didn't lie in seduction alone, but in how she remained untouched by the very men who obsessed over her. But with Undu, something was breaking. She found herself waiting for his messages, rearranging her evenings in case he might stop by. She scolded herself for the softness creeping into her voice, for the way she caught herself smiling at his jokes, even when they weren't that funny. This wasn't the plan. She had wanted to use him. Now she was being changed by him. One evening, as she prepared for a meeting with Undu, she caught herself in the mirror again. Her reflection didn't look like the invincible woman she had built. There was warmth in her eyes, a flicker of something tender. She turned away, annoyed. Later that night, they met by the riverbank. The moon cast silver light across the water, and they sat in the grass silent for a long time. Finally, Undu spoke. "You seem different." She looked at him. "So do you." He studied her face. "I didn't come here looking for anything personal, but now I don't know what this is anymore." Annette swallowed hard. She could feel her armor cracking, but she didn't know how to stop it. "This isn't real," she said, a little too quickly. "You'll leave, and I'll remain who I've always been." He nodded slowly. "Maybe, but I think you're tired of who you've always been." That struck a nerve. Annette stood abruptly. "You don't know me well enough to say that." "I don't need to. You just flinched when I did." She didn't respond. The silence between them thickened. That night she couldn't sleep. Her room felt too quiet. Her bed, too cold. She replayed his words over and over, not because she hated them, but because part of her knew they were true. Was she tired? Not of the men, not of the money, but of the act, of being wanted but never known. She had built a life where everything was calculated, but now feelings were slipping in through the cracks, feelings that didn't obey rules, and it terrified her. Days passed, their encounters grew colder. She became distant again, sharp. He didn't chase. That hurt more than if he had. She tried to fill the void with other men, with gifts, with nights that ended in satin sheets and silence. But nothing felt the same. Undu had touched something in her, not her body, but the part of her that remembered once wanting to be loved. One afternoon, word spread through the village. Undu was preparing to leave. The news hit her like thunder. She sat on her porch, unmoving, for hours. The sky changed colors. Children played and went home. Night came. Still, she didn't move. Finally, she stood, walked into her room, and opened a wooden box she hadn't touched in years. Inside were letters, photos, a scarf from her mother, a necklace from a time she still believed in dreams. She took out a photo of herself at 16, wide-eyed, smiling for real. "What happened to her?" she whispered. The next morning she dressed simply. No makeup, no jewelry, just herself. She went to see him. Undu was packing. When he saw her at the door, he paused. "I came to say goodbye," she said. He nodded. "I figured you might." There was an awkward silence. "I don't know what I expected," she said, voice trembling. "Maybe nothing, but I felt something with you, and that scares me." He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "It scared me too." She looked down. "So what do we do with that?" "I leave," he said gently, "and you decide who you want to be when I'm gone." He didn't kiss her, didn't touch her, just held her gaze for a moment longer than usual. Then he left. Annette stood there long after the car disappeared down the dusty road. And for the first time in her adult life, she felt the silence inside her. Not as loneliness, but as space. Space for something else. In the days after Undu's departure, something strange happened. Annette didn't return to her routines. She didn't wear her finest silks, didn't visit the usual cafes where men waited to buy her time. She stayed home, walked barefoot in the garden, cooked her own meals, sat with her thoughts longer than she ever had, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't performing. There was no one to impress, no transaction to manage, just a woman alone with her truth. It was not easy. She wept at night, sometimes from regret, sometimes from relief. She missed Undu, but not in the way she used to miss men. This was different. She missed the version of herself he had stirred awake. The one who dreamed, the one who longed to be held, not bought. Word spread quickly in the village. Annette had changed. The men whispered she was rejecting offers. The women speculated perhaps she was sick. Some assumed she was heartbroken. They weren't entirely wrong. She was heartbroken, but not from love. From years of betraying her own soul. Mara came to visit one morning, a rare gesture. She sat on Annette's porch sipping tea. "I used to envy your power," she said. "Now I wonder what it cost you." Annette looked at her. "Everything I didn't even know I had," Mara nodded. "So what now?" Annette looked out at the street where she once strutted like a queen. "Now I live." She started painting. Badly at first, but the colors soothed her. She took long walks with no destination. Smiled at children. Read books with no purpose other than pleasure. Some days were lonely, but they were hers. Then came the day a young woman named Kemi knocked on her door. She was barely 20, beautiful and bold in all the ways Annette had once been. "I want what you have," Kemi said. "The freedom, the money, the attention." Annette looked at her with quiet eyes. "I once thought I had those things too," she said. "But what I really had was a cage with golden walls?" Kemi blinked. "Then what should I want?" "Yourself," Annette said. "Start there. Everything else will wait." The conversation marked something. Word began to spread. Not about Annette's beauty, but her change. Women came not for secrets of seduction, but for guidance. For truth. She had become something else entirely. Not a seductress. Not a scandal. Not even a story. She had become a mirror. And through her, others began to see themselves, clearly, maybe for the first time. Annette still missed Undu sometimes, but not with pain, with gratitude. He hadn't broken her. He had unmasked her. And in doing so, he had offered her a gift far greater than gold, the chance to return home to herself. The woman who once used love to gain power had discovered that the real power was in learning to love herself.